Russians who told us that it was impossible to cycle across Russia. Of course, they'd never tried cycling across Russia. I remember my Russian friend, the first thing he told me when I suggested the idea: "You won't make it more than 100 kilometers without being robbed." The winter would freeze us. We would drown in the spring in the melting snow. The mafia, of course, would be terrorizing. And what's more, we'd be eaten alive by Siberian mosquitoes, thousands of them. And if we made it that far, there's no way we'd make it through the Gobi Desert. The message was pretty clear. We were Aussies and far out of our depth. It was, as the Russians told me, impossible. What they didn't tell us was that we'd be showered with hospitality. Siberia, Russia, had always been a myth for us in Australia. We had a look on a map, and it was clear that it was across the tundra. There was the taiga forest, the Gobi Desert on the plateau in Mongolia, faraway places. Our destination, the streets near Tiananmen Square. Several times the bicycle snapped in half.
Probably about 1,000 kilometres away from the next bike repair shop.
And there was always a local willing to weld it up. And what's more, he always refused to take money for it. We were going for about 6 months, often around 110, 120 kilometres a day. We'd get up at 8 o'clock, ride until it was almost dark, stop, make camp, chop the firewood. We ate 4 kilos a day. Very often our water source was ditches on the roadsides and little pools. Of course, after a while though, there was no water left at all frozen, so we had to chop ice blocks and then melt them in the pots. At one stage we had the misfortune of frostbite, with a doctor from Dagestan cut the end of my toes off, and living with a family and an adopted grandma, a mother and sister and an auntie. One babushka in particular, Baba Galia we called her, she really looked after us. She took us into her home. She cooked for us for about 10 days, she fed us potatoes, pancakes. She even sewed up our clothes, she knitted me some new socks. And fortunately, our feet got better and we had a great week, got to know an entire village. We used to call her during the trip and tell her how we're getting on, and the first thing she'd say, "Oh, boys, I've been worrying about you so much." It was people like that that helped us mentally to go on. The locals kept on telling us that the road was going to be very bad, or even that there was no road at all. The mosquitoes are out in their thousands. We've got about 17 kilometres to go to the next village. There's a storm on the way. It's definitely a challenge. But we had an idea that we would take the Balm Railway up to the north of Lake Baikal, which is the largest lake in the world. Very quickly, we realised that there was no road and there was just the Balm Railway. And for about 4 or 5 days, pushed along these rails. And after a while we got very frustrated with just pushing the bike, so we tried to build a contraption to actually cycle on the railway. Spent an entire day trying to build this thing, chopping birch and using hose clamps to create some kind of a train. Unfortunately it lasted about 500 metres. Chris, come on, get out! Is that a train? It's a train! Get out! And we'd pick up the bikes and hurtle down the embankment and wave to the train driver. I think all the train drivers got to know us, actually. All I want to do is crawl into camp, cook my food and go to sleep. Only 700 left to Lake Baikal. Mongolia really is still a land of nomadic people. And in the middle of the desert, up on the steppe, we'd run into these yurt tents. The tradition is that you can just walk straight into these yurts without even knocking on the front door. So we started doing that, and we met with, once again, great hospitality and entertained by these incredible stockmen on horses that gave you the impression that they were still warriors. The Gobi Desert was what separated us from the capital of Mongolia, Ulaanbaatar, and the Chinese border. There was 900 kilometres of sandy wheel tracks. No signs, no nothing, so we were reduced to using compass and a continent map at a scale about 1 to 5 million. And it took us about 23 days of pushing through this deep sand to get through the Gobi Desert down to the Chinese border, and at times we were carrying about 90 kilograms on the bikes, including lots of water. We rode straight into a closed town without knowing it. Basically, trying to hide from police and some other crazy people that we met. And before we knew it, we were being escorted to a local police station. We were arrested for 2 days, but it became very clear at the beginning, as they were interrogating us, that yes, they were doing their job, but they were also interested in us. When we arrived in Tiananmen Square, we were just like little boys in an opening Christmas present. I felt like, yes, I've finished the journey, and I was in elation, euphoria. And we were just pushing these bikes with grins, and there was people, Chinese people following us, huge crowds, staring at us, and a great feeling. This is not a story about cycling, really, nor even just travel. And it's not only just a voyage about discovery, but a journey of personal growth, interesting and positive interaction with locals. On the banks of rivers, in their gardens, and a complete stranger would suddenly become, a dear friend. It seemed that we were never alone in our struggle. Russians were always ready to help us, 2 young Australians, and I guess they felt sorry for us more than anything. They always said, "Oi, oi, oi, boys, what are you doing?" I'd never do it again, but it's the unknown around the corner that keeps us going.